What will the world be like in 2,000 years? In 1921, a Swiss teacher named Paul fell into a coma due to encephalitis and didn't wake up until a year later. He claimed that he had traveled to the year 3906, and the people of the future revealed to him the incredible science fiction events that occurred between the 21st and 39th centuries, including a super world war, Martian migration, and a consciousness network. He recorded these experiences in his diary. Years later, Paul's students organized and published the diary, but it was considered heretical and heavily criticized by people at the time. So, what did the diary record? What did Paul see in the future world? Today, let's talk about Paul's miraculous time travel story. Paul Amadeus Dienach was a Swiss teacher who fell into a coma due to encephalitis in 1921. After waking up, he went to Greece to teach German. There, he met a student named George Papahatz, and the two became good friends. In 1924, Paul contracted fatal tuberculosis. Before he died, he gave George a diary written in German. Paul asked George to translate the diary into Greek to improve his German skills. But during the translation process, George became increasingly uneasy. He found out that his teacher had traveled through time and space to the year 3906 while in a coma. In his diary, Paul wrote that he saw a white light after losing consciousness and found himself in an incredibly large city filled with technology he had never seen before. He also discovered that his body was not his own, but his consciousness was still intact. He tried to break free from his restraints but couldn't. The humans of the future then greeted him and told him that the owner of the body was a famous physicist named Andreas Rosenthal. The humans of 3906 knew that Paul came from the year 1921 and considered him one of the chosen few. They called this phenomenon supervision or consciousness drifting. Paul stayed in the future for a year, during which the humans of the future told him about the history between the 21st and 39th centuries. However, they did not mention what happened in the 21st century. They told Paul that he would return to his own time and experience what happened in the 21st century, as they feared he might change history. When Paul woke up, he immediately realized that his experience was not a dream because dreams are fleeting and cannot be remembered so vividly after waking up. He did not dare to tell anyone about his experience because in that era, he would have been considered crazy. Later, he used his spare time to secretly write down everything that would happen in the future in his diary. When George finished translating the diary, he was shocked, but he did not immediately share the manuscripts with the world. It was not until 1973, after George retired, that he compiled Paul's experience into a book called Chronicles of the Future and published it. The book is over 300 pages long, with a large portion of it documenting events from the years 2000 to 3906. The publication of this book caused controversy among George and many others, with many people deeming it too absurd. In 1979, Greece experienced a national movement, and George was targeted due to his political views. His publication, The Chronicles of the Future, disappeared from public view and was only circulated in small theological circles. It wasn't until 2016, when a member of the Masonic Lodge republished the book, that people truly began to understand the future world that Paul saw in his coma. Next, we want to examine what Paul knows about future world events based on specific time markers in the book. During the first 200 years, humanity began to solve many problems on Earth, such as energy, environment, and climate change. However, overpopulation and economic conflicts were not resolved, and people became embroiled in a race for financial survival. Small-scale wars broke out in many regions due to economic problems. In order to solve these problems, humans implemented the Mars Immigration Plan in 2204, and 20 million people immigrated to Mars. Unfortunately, 61 years later, a major disaster struck Mars, and the migrating humans were destroyed before they could react. After this, humanity abandoned the plan to transform Mars. In 2309, due to a series of unresolved issues, a super war broke out on Earth, which was more brutal than any previous conflict. In the year 2396, for the first time, humanity established a world government designed to prevent the catastrophe of a super war. History was recalculated from that moment, and the world government managed the global economy, military, and resources, and redistributed them. Banks and stock exchanges disappeared, replaced by a voting system. Despite the redistribution of global resources, everyone still retained a portion of their private property. Everyone lived a healthy life and enjoyed the most basic guarantees. The satisfaction of material life made humanity begin to focus on their spiritual world. At the end of this stage, the world government began to establish contact with extraterrestrial civilizations and publicly declared that war on Earth had become history. From 2400 to 2600, human life became very simple, while living space became increasingly scarce. The global government began to centralize, and some countries and regions began to oppose this form. Some barbaric organizations began to disrupt the world government, and network hackers ran rampant. Although there were no large-scale events, ordinary people were shrouded in this strange world situation for several centuries. This continued until 2600, when people gradually moved from national consciousness to planetary consciousness. The work of the world government was on track, and savage organizations were quelled, and voting became a new way of life. At that time, transportation was achieved through etheric energy and flying saucers. Between 2600 and 3400, Earth science made great progress. Humans no longer rely on traditional medicine such as medicine to treat diseases, but use new treatments such as sound, color, light, and meditation. Humans began to study the internal structure of the Earth, and many cities were built there. Basic necessities of human life were made equal. However, there were still differences in technology between different regions. Most importantly, human beings still had a materialistic orientation, and spiritual development was very slow. They always measured themselves with wealth and technology. The original text called this era of slow spiritual development the peculiar Dark Age, which lasted until 3400. There was a special year in this phase, 3382. In that year, a miraculous phenomenon took place among humans. People began to acquire a new psychic ability called clairvoyance or superintuition. Some people could enter the great light of the spirit to obtain knowledge and creativity. Due to the awakening of this ability in 3382, most people reached a state of superintuition. More and more people were able to directly obtain knowledge, and human beings began to enter a new era of civilization. Scientists have discovered and activated more than 2 dormant DNA strands, further enhancing human consciousness. Humans can even communicate directly through consciousness, and their lifespan has been extended for several centuries, but work only lasts for a short 2 years. People begin to use a new form of transportation where gates, material vehicles, and passengers can move to another 3-dimensional space instantly through non-physical vibrations, similar to teleportation. Material goods are almost free, and no one has private property. Everyone is a vegetarian. Humans are in close contact with other civilizations in the galaxy, and with their help, have transformed wildness into noble qualities. Crime, violence, and savagery are a thing of the past. Humans focus only on the stage of creating honor and become a galaxy civilization with an extremely developed scientific spirit, just like other civilizations in the galaxy. The future that Teacher Paul sees is truly amazing, especially the progress of human spiritual abilities. However, this is too much like science fiction, making people wonder if Paul mistook his coma-induced hallucinations for reality. Moreover, his diary has been edited and published twice. Will George and the Freemason members include their scientific fantasies in it? If you want to know more, you can buy a copy of the Future Chronicle. Reminder, you can treat it as a science fiction novel, but don't take it seriously.
If you enjoyed this video, please subscribe to our channel so that you will be the first to receive the latest videos from us. Click the red subscribe button. Thank you.